In the third video of this Dominican Republic deep dive, we are attacking the slightly more aged rums from the three big brands, Barcelo, Brugal and Matusalem. Now this is where I'd expect the rums to slightly get a bit different, because the previous two videos, in my mind, the knowledge that's out there is pretty minimal unless you speak directly to the distilleries. I would assume that the previous two videos where I did the white rums and then the gold rums are effectively pretty much the same rums, except the white rums will have been charcoal filters. Now, I'm assuming we're actually going up the years in aging. Hello rum friends, welcome back to the channel. But for those of you that are new around these parts, hello and welcome. My name is Steve the Barman, and right here on my blue channel, it's mainly focused on rum tastings and rum reviews. Each month or each couple of months, I take a different country, a different island in turn, and then we kind of pit the rums against each other to give you my opinions of which rums you should be looking for that country or island. So if that sounds like fun, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But if you want to check out my 5 other YouTube channels, they will all be linked in the description below. Now, just one thing I quickly mentioned, because I haven't mentioned this for a few videos, and I know there's a lot of new faces around these parts as well. My focus is primarily on rums under 50 UK pounds, 60 US dollars, 60 euros, that ballpark. I never really want to get into the expensive rums. I leave all that for other reviewers and people that have been drinking rum neat all their entire life. You have to remember, at heart, I'm a cocktail bartender, so I'm looking at rums that, yes, I do enjoy neat. You know, that's a big part of it as well, but also rums that you would quite happily use in your cocktails. And there's another thing as well that I kind of have to preface. My preference for neat sipping rums is primarily younger rums. I like rum to taste of rum. I don't like rum to taste of barrels or whiskey, because the rum's been aged in ex-whiskey barrels for 5, 10, 20 years, whatever. That's not my vibe. I like my rum to taste of rum. So unadulterated, if you like. Maybe, you know, I don't mean that in the terms of sugar. You know, we know that a lot of brands add sugar, but I purely mean I'm not a hugest fan of long-aged rums. We haven't had this debate for a while, so this could be quite funny. Dive into the comments below and let me know your opinions on this. But you know, for me, there's a lot of, you know, when the geeks and the big rum people are talking, they hate unadulterated rum. They just like rum to taste of rum. But for me, I want to understand, and I want a discussion on this, of why rum that's been aged in ex-whiskey barrels or ex-wine barrels, like, you know, sherry and all that, why that is absolutely fine and they don't mind that. And yet, if you add even a merest smidge of sugar to your rum, it's changing the whole flavour and all that. Whereas, you know, for me, the rum is at its best in years 0 to 5. That's me. I love that. There is a few longer aged rums that I do generically like, sort of 7, 8 year olds, you know, but I don't go that much higher. And even then, you'd be looking at virgin oak and something like that. It hasn't had the ex-whiskey casks and all that going along. Cognac casks I don't mind, because I absolutely adore cognac, so that's my thing. But have a debate in the comments below. You know, what is the difference between rum that's been aged for 12 years in an ex-whiskey barrel that's going to give you lots of whiskey vibes and effectively, you know, tasting a little bit more like whiskey than rum, and the difference between like a 4-year-old, 5-year-old rum that is rum? Get involved in that debate in the comments below. Right, so I haven't done the price comparison in this series because there was generally no point, because they're all loosely, you know, the same prices. And I know, because you're so close in the US, I know you're going to be paying dramatically less than what we are. But these, we've gone up from the sort of 18 to 22 pounds, which, you know, that would translate as 25, 26 US dollars. That's what I mean. I know full well that you're paying like $15, $16 for this in the US. So there's no point doing that whole comparison. These, we're now moving on to the late 20s. So, you know, 26, 27 up to 30. The Matusalem is the most expensive one, just over 30. So you're talking roughly sort of 35 to 40 US dollars. But again, I know full well you are not even paying remotely close to $40 for any of these. Now, I'd love to give you age statements of what these are and how much more aged they are compared to to these rums. The simple thing is I can't. Even though the Matusalem has a great big 10 on the front, I know full well that is not a 10-year-old rum. In fact, I'm not even overly convinced it's not Solera aged. So the 10 doesn't mean years old. It might mean average, or it might mean the oldest in there, but I'm pretty much assuming, I'm sure it's Solera aged. I'm pretty much assuming that the 10 is, relatively speaking, means not a lot. And yeah, just to clarify, I have gone on to Master of Malt in the UK, and a big shout out to Master of Malt because they have I think it's that one, but it's an ongoing paid partnership. All my channels now with Master of Malt, they do supply me ingredients, they supply me rums from time to time. So if you're in the UK and around the world, you can actually buy it from Master of Malt, except they don't ship to the US. If you want any of the English rums, I think the Whiskey Exchange ship to 19 states. But for all of you around the rest of the world, check out Master of Malt, because they'll quite happily ship to you guys. And on that, their knowledge is normally pretty damn accurate. And just to read off this, because you don't really get this off the Matusalem website, a Dominican rum distilled in continuous stills and matured for an average of a decade using the Solera system. And the brand was started in Cuba in 1872, although eventually it emigrated, blah, blah, blah. So we know full well that there will be some 6-month-old rum in that, some year-old rum in that. So the 10, even when it says average of 10 years old, it's a little bit of a nonsense when it comes to Solera. It's not me being a Debbie Downer. I love Solera rums. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. It's when Solera rums try to give you an age statement, and you know what? It's impossible. It's actually impossible, because even if the Solera has been going for 20, 25 years, you know, as soon as you put 250 litres of a new barrel, of a new cask, of a new rum into that Solera system, that's just dramatically brought the age down. So this whole average of 10 years is a little bit of a nonsense. I wish Solera would get away from that, because it does give them a bad name. But if you take a Solera at face value, they're actually really, really good. And I think I should cover this before I go any further as well. For those of you that really don't know what Solera system is, I will flash a picture up on screen. But just imagine, for bare basics, 3 tiers of barrels. Okay, so you fill your bottles from the bottom tier, and then the middle tier, and then the top tier. You top your rum, your new rum, into the top tier. So when you take rum out of the bottom tier, you then fill that from the second tier, and then you top the second tier up with the first tier. That's the Solera. Solera can be a lot more complicated than that. It can have like 5 tiers. It can have like different barrels going on. It can have like 10 tiers. But that's just the essence. The bottom tier, you fill up your bottles. Your middle tier then fills up the bottom tier, and then your top tier is where the new rum is, and then it's filled in there. So if you have a busy, this is the whole thing, and I want to get across. If you have a busy couple of months and you're shifting a lot of rum, you know, the chances are that Solera is going to be, you know, pretty much sort of not drained, but you know, you are going to have a lot of rum going out of that. So therefore, you know, the turnover of that rum is really, really quick. It's not sitting in those barrels for years and years and years and years. Now, on the nose, again, I'm not getting too much from these. And it's the same, you know, what's come before it. I'm really not. The big one I'm getting is probably a little bit more vanilla off the Matusalem. In fact, a lot of vanilla, a lot of caramel coming off there. Smells slightly sweeter than the other two. But what I will say is that they do smell more inviting than these. The rums, just make sure, I think they should be on camera, but the rums in the previous video. These do offer me a little bit more complexity. Now, again, this kind of goes, this is this weird thing, because this is why I'm loving British rum, to do this comparison, right? I'm absolutely adoring British rum straight off the stills, and I love that. But British rum is being distilled in a very, very different way to, you know, what any of these guys are doing. So kind of, you know, the whole column still thing, don't take this as neutral spirits, as I've said in the previous videos. But what they do is they do get rid of some of that flavour, whereas the British rums don't. Now, where I am with this, these are still, even on the aroma, these are still not even remotely close for me picking up wet, soggy wood or anything like that. I'm envisioning these still being pretty young at heart. Like essentially a 3, a 4, maybe at a push 5-year-old rum in there. But we know as I say, with the Solera, you're guaranteed to have some young, very young rum in there. But this is probably off the nose, without even tasting yet, probably where my palate is. But to split them, you know, there's really not much difference. I might get a slightly bit more ethanol, a little bit of varnish off the Brugal Extra Viejo. But, you know, it's just that generic sort of molasses, toffee, caramel, touch of vanilla, little bit of kind of dried fruit, but not overly much. You know, there's nothing, it's not like Jamaica, it's not like Barbados, it's not like St. Lucia, it's not like Guyana, it's nothing like that. It's not even like Puerto Rico, the Don Q's, nothing like those. Very interesting, this Dominican Republic so far for me. Now, neat sipping. Way, way, way better to sip neat than the previous versions. Way better. I would say that rawness of the alcohol, and again, I don't want to keep coming to the British scratch rums, but the British guys, some of them do. Like, I'm not going to name and shame, but some of them do. But the really good British rums have literally nailed it off the still, and you don't have that ethanol, you don't have that varnish, you don't have that rough and ready. They are just delicious off the stills. Whereas I find some of the younger Caribbean stuff quite harsh and unaged off the stills. And this is in my head, and this argument that I kind of formulated to start off with, is that perhaps some of the older distillers, the ones with the older stills, they've been doing it time over time over time, rely on that heavily aging to mellow their rums out. Perhaps that's what it is. Perhaps a flippant comment. Perhaps they haven't got the skills of what the British guys have got coming out of the gate. No, take that how you will. But this is my mind. How can the British rums taste phenomenal off the stills, unaged, just straight off the stills, maybe mellowed, even brought down to ABV at 40, 45%. How can they taste phenomenal like that? And then other brands that have been around donkey's years not taste that good neat. That's kind of what I would love to formulate in my head and what I don't understand. From my point of view is a lot of Caribbean rums need aging to mellow them out, and then it gets to a certain point where it just goes off into whiskey and all this. Whereas some of the, even like Martinique and some of those, you know, people who are adopting new stills and new methods don't need to mellow their rums out. They just taste phenomenal off the stills. So from that, random waffle is my way of saying that these that have been in a barrel, obviously slightly longer than what they have, taste a damn sight better. Now, are they in the realms of the Chairman's Reserve, the St. Lucia the months before? No. But are any of you going to be put off at this, and like discounting the people at like their 55, 60% aged rums, the Barcelona's, the Barbados rums, the Jamaica rums, discount all those entry people that would possibly be interested in this video. Is anything here going to put you off? Is there a feisty wood burn? No. Is there a feisty alcohol burn? No. I dare say these might be like slightly dosed. I'm guessing the Matusalem, of any, because it's the one with the most vanilla that's coming off it, and the easier one to drink, even though it's 40% ABV. That's 38 and that's 37.5. This one drinks like it's potentially 35, you know, mid to early 30s. It's really easy to drink this. So I would, you know, without having the facts, I would assume that that's had a little bit of dosage to it to mellow that out, to make that drink. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's not what this channel's about. If you want to add sugar, if you're a brand and you want to add sugar or something just to mellow it out, you do you. You absolutely do you. There's nothing wrong with that. To the 5% crowd, there is. To the mass market, there isn't. To the mass market, it makes your rums more drinkable. My favourite of the neat sipper, all of these actually offer me something different, and I'm probably going to discount the Matusalem, even though it probably is the easiest to drink neat, purely because I think that's almost on the realms of a really delicately spiced rum. Spiced rums in the UK have a little bit of sweetness to them. And not, you know, I'm not talking ones with the heavy cinnamon, the heavy nutmeg, clove and all that sort of stuff. I'm just talking about the delicate ones. That's there. Whereas the Barcelo, I even like the Brugal Extra Viejo, to be fair. It's some more sort of toasty oats notes. I'm going to have a punt now. The very next test that's coming up is the Rum and Coke. I'm going to have a punt now. Oh, actually, that's going to be a sweeter. That's going to be a vanilla one. I was going to say the Extra Viejo might be my favourite as a Rum and Coke, but I've got a funny feeling that actually might punch out and be a really good Rum and Coke. But all of those are going to be pretty decent rum fashions to the mass market and sipping neat. There's nothing, don't let anyone tell you there is. There's nothing wrong with these. Yes, I appreciate the rum connoisseurs want a lot more ABV, a lot more aging. I appreciate that. I'm not talking to them. That's not my audience. My audience is the entry, the people that are just sort of migrating away from cocktails, getting into neat sipping. Honestly, I would bracket these within the Flor de Carne 12 sort of range. You know, really accessible, really easy drinking rums. Now we come on to the Rum and Coke test, and look, this is way, way, way more on tune with what I was expecting those rums. Really is. It's not a bad Rum and Coke here, to be fair. And it is pretty much what I'm assuming. You know, I think the vast majority of Rum and Coke fans probably might go to Matusalem. It's just got that softer note, even though it's 40% ABV. I dare say, as I said, repeating it, I dare say it's been sweetened ever so slightly, because you do get those big vanilla notes. It's like a dialed back vanilla Coke. That's what that tastes like, without it being like a super sweet, like a Sailor Jerry or a Kraken or anything like that. I'm actually shocked, because my favourite is the Barcelo. Neat tasting, I think my favourite because of the depth and because I do like darker rums, and I'm assuming the barrels in this might have been a slightly more heavily charred than what the Barcelo may be. It gives me those notes. So I'm a big dark rum fan, but for Rum and Coke, my tip goes to that Barcelo. I mean, it's not earth-shattering, it's not brilliant. I've got much better rums behind me that I would pull out for Rum and Coke all day long. But out of these, if you want Dominican Republic, and I'll get onto this in a second. Do you know what? They're all pretty good. What I'm trying to formulate in my mind is that why would you buy a Dominican rum so far, any of these three groups, why would you buy any of these over a St. Lucian, over a Puerto Rican, over a Barbados? And that's what I'm struggling with in a moment, because none of these excite me. Like, for instance, even so, to go to St. Lucia, the Bounty, the Column Still, the lighter ones with this, the lighter gold ones, give me way. Where is it? It's down. Here it is. The gold Bounty gives me way more flavour than what that does at the same price point. So I'm struggling to do that argument at the moment. It's like, all these countries, all these islands are fighting against, other, and it's pretty much the tourists. It's pretty much the locals to Dominican Republic and the tourists, I grab a bottle of this rum. Because I don't think in the UK, the British Isles, and in places like that where we've got a whole abundance of different rums available, I don't think they compete. But the flip on this is going to be like the US market, for instance, where these are dirt cheap. I'm assuming that a lot of this will come in a damn sight cheaper than Barbados, than Jamaica and all that. So all of a sudden, you are then on a price thing. Whereas in the UK, we can't, these are never going to compete on price in the UK. So they've got to be outstanding rums at 27 to £30. Let's just go that, for example, wherever it's gone. Where is it? My chairman's there. Ain't no way in the world that even that's cheaper. Ain't no way in the world that either of those two are replacing that. Now, when it comes to the daiquiri, after the previous video, I don't like aged rum daiquiris. That is just a fact. I've said that time and time again. There is no point me even doing this as a video because I know full well that I'm just going to go, no, no, no. That's where my daiquiri head is, white unaged rums. They're not for me at all. So I'm going to skip the daiquiri test. Your ginger beer, your ginger ales are largely going to be the same with this. There's not a bad one there. We now come on to the Missionary's Downfall, which is kind of the cocktail challenge for this month because it's a lighter style of rum that goes into the Missionary's Downfall. You have got mint, and just to recap the last one, I haven't used actual fresh mint. I've used mint syrup, so I can just guarantee consistency over every single rum that I do with the mint syrup. This is actually where they start to play a little bit better. And actually, and the one that does pop for me is that Brugal Extra Viejo. It really does pop in the cocktail. It gives me a little bit of depth of flavour, a little bit of boldness. The character does come out. So, yeah, to sum this video up, look, it's kind of where I'm getting now. There is a fourth tier coming. I haven't got the rums for that yet, but there is a fourth tier of these coming, and then we're obviously having Kirk and Sweeney come into the battles as well. Kirk and Sweeney don't have a rum per se in this price bracket, in this age range. I think even they're younger. Is it the Reserva? I forget what it is generically older than that. And I put the Reserva against the Matusalem 15, I think it is. That's where my head is with that. I am struggling to justify where these fit in the market. Apart from local, and by local I do mean US as well, because that's just a trip across, you know, the Caribbean Ocean. So it's going to be a damn sight cheaper there than what it is here. So the price does come into it. If you're paying like $18 in the US for these rums, which is going to be 14 pounds UK, that's the price we're talking about, then there is nothing wrong with these. These are going to be fantastic cocktail rums. But the price they are here in the UK at between £27 and 30, or £26, say, and £30, which is what, $35, $36 and $40. They just don't compete. They are not in that. They're not at that level where they compete. They're great rums. They're good rums. They're just not great rums. But you know, I can't but help. These are all right as neat sippers. They are, you know. Rum fashions, if these are in a pub or bar, in the UK, and they've got these on, and it's to their extent, I ain't going to feel bad about having one of these as a rum fashioned or sip neat on the Extra Viejo. It's not terrible. It really isn't terrible. And that's how I can only leave this video. It's the price, I think, that just does it. It really is. But anyway, in the next video, we're going to be attacking the slightly even more heavily aged ones, probably the ones more geared towards neat sipping. And I'm not sure whether the Brugal 1888 comes out into this one or whether it's the next one above that. I don't know. We shall find out. But it's the next tier up after these.